Anakin stepped into Barriss Offee's dimly lit quarters, his presence casting a foreboding shadow over the room. Barriss, seated in meditation, opened her eyes and forced a serene smile, though the guilt of her actions weighed heavily on her.
Enter.
She welcomes Anakin, her voice calm. Anakin's eyes burned with barely restrained fury.
Barriss, I need to talk to you.
She nodded, her expression neutral.
Of course, Anakin. What is it?
You were the last to speak with Ahsoka before she was arrested. What did you say to her?
His voice was icy, the words clipped.
I was only trying to help her.
Barriss replied, feigning innocence.
I hope I'm not in any trouble.
Anakin's gaze hardened as he picked up Barriss's lightsaber from her meditation area.
Ventress said you're involved.
Barriss tensed, sensing his trap.
I only spoke the truth, as did she.
In a flash, Anakin ignited her own saber against her, forcing Barriss to defend herself with Ventress's hidden twin blades. The room crackled with the sound of clashing sabers.
It was you.
Anakin snarled.
You bombed the temple.
Barriss's face twisted with conviction.
The Jedi only know violence. They deserve.
But Anakin, his movements wild and unhinged, interrupted her. His strikes were relentless, driven by a rage she had never seen. This is where Anakin cannot hold his rage any longer as he raises his voice.
You killed Padme!
In this story, Padme is one of the unfortunate souls lost in the bombing of the Jedi Temple. Where would the story go if Barriss had killed Padme? How far would Anakin descend into darkness from his thirst for vengeance? Or will his friend remind him the meaning of forgiveness? Stay tuned for this episode of What If? And if you like more content such as this, be sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below what scenario you want to see next. Flashback. Minutes before the bombing of the Jedi Temple, Padme was at the Jedi Temple and goes to visit Barriss after a conversation with Anakin. As Padme walked towards the temple exit, she encountered Jakar Bomani, a maintenance worker she often saw around the Senate and the temple. He greeted her warmly, offering a wide smile. Jakar bowing slightly, Padme replied with a gentle smile. But before she could continue, a sudden, violent explosion tore through the air. The force of the blast was devastating. The shockwave threw Padme off her feet, her body engulfed in searing heat and blinding light. The world around her crumbled into chaos as the temple's corridors were torn apart. Jakar, who had unknowingly carried the bomb within him, was obliterated in the blast. At that moment, across the city, Anakin Skywalker felt a cold, suffocating wave of dread wash over him. He dropped to his knees, gasping for breath as the Force screamed at the death of Padme. The bond they shared had been severed, leaving only a void of agony and fury. Anakin's eyes blazed with a fury that few had ever seen. The Coruscant guard, silent and vigilant, flanked him as he stood over the fallen Barriss Offee. She was barely able to defend herself from his relentless assault, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she stared up at him, her own lightsaber now pointed at her throat.
You!
Anakin hissed, his voice trembling with rage.
You killed her! You killed Padme! You betrayed everything the Jedi stand for!
Barriss, battered and beaten, looked up at him with a mix of defiance and resignation.
The Jedi have lost their way.
Anakin's grip tightened on the saber, his knuckles white. The Coruscant guard moved in, seizing Barriss and pulling her to her feet. Anakin's gaze never left her as they restrained her, his anger simmering just below the surface. Barriss Offee stood before the Jedi Council, her hands bound, her face bruised but unbowed. Tarkin's eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he read the charges against her. Anakin stood beside Ahsoka, his face a mask of cold indifference as Barriss was condemned for her crimes.
I did it.
Barriss said, her voice ringing out in the chamber.
I did it because I've come to realize, the people have come to realize, that the Jedi is responsible for the war. That we have so lost our way in this conflict. We became the villains in this conflict.
Ahsoka, though exonerated, looked at the council with a mixture of sadness and disillusionment. She turned to Anakin, her voice low.
This isn't the order I thought I knew. I can't stay.
Anakin's heart sank further into darkness as he watched her leave the temple, the last vestiges of his faith in the Jedi crumbling away. The loss of Padme, the betrayal of Barriss, and now Ahsoka's departure had stripped him of everything he held dear. Palpatine's words echoed in his mind, promising power, control, and the ability to prevent such losses in the future. Anakin's fall to the dark side had begun, and there was no turning back. The dim light of the prison cell cast long shadows across the cold stone walls, adding to the oppressive atmosphere that weighed heavily on Barriss Offee. She sat on the narrow cot, her mind consumed by the recent trial, the harsh judgment of the Jedi Council, and the bitter realization of what she had become. The door to her cell slid open with a sharp hiss, pulling her from her thoughts. Anakin Skywalker stepped inside, his face a mask of controlled fury. The guards outside the cell gave him a respectful nod, then retreated, leaving him alone with Barriss. For a moment, neither spoke. Anakin's eyes bore into Barriss, his expression inscrutable, while she met his gaze with a mixture of defiance and resignation.
Anakin,
She finally said, her voice hoarse.
why are you here?
Anakin's response was cold and direct.
I want you to know how much suffering you've caused the Jedis. How much pain you caused me.
Barriss sighed, her eyes dropping to the floor.
The Jedi have lost their way. The Order has become a tool of the Senate, of the Republic, of war. Consider this a warning.
Anakin's hand clenched into a fist.
And you thought killing Padme would prove that? She was innocent, Barriss. She had nothing to do with your twisted crusade.
She wasn't supposed to be there, Anakin. It was supposed to be only the...
Barriss snapped, her voice rising.
No!
Anakin roared, cutting her off. Before Barriss could respond, Anakin's hand shot out, and the Force wrapped around her throat like an iron vice. Barriss's eyes widened in shock as she gasped for breath, her hands clawing at her neck. But there was no escape from Anakin's grip.
You took everything from me.
Anakin hissed, his voice low and deadly.
Now, I'll take everything from you.
With a savage twist of his wrist, the sickening sound of snapping bones echoed through the cell. Barriss's body went limp, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling as life left her. Anakin released his hold, letting her body slump to the floor. For a moment, the cell was silent, the weight of what he had done hanging in the air like a shroud. But the silence was soon shattered by the alarm klaxons blaring through the prison. The guards, having witnessed the murder through the surveillance cameras, burst into the cell, weapons drawn.
Anakin Skywalker, stand down.
One of them shouted, but Anakin didn't resist. He stood motionless, his mind numb, as the guards moved in to restrain him. They slapped binders on his wrists, pulling him from the cell and leading him through the corridors of the prison. News of Anakin Skywalker's arrest spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The media buzzed with debates and discussions, with many questioning whether his actions were justified. Some argued that Barriss had deserved her fate, while others condemned Anakin for crossing a line that should never be crossed. Within the Jedi Temple, the Council was in turmoil. Anakin, once the Chosen One, had committed a grave crime, and the Order's credibility was now in question. Whispers of his growing connection to the dark side grew louder, and the divide between the Jedi and the Republic deepened. Palpatine, watching from the shadows, couldn't have been more pleased. Anakin's descent into darkness was now inevitable, and with each passing day, the young Jedi was slipping further from the light and into the grip of the Sith. The Senate chamber buzzed with tension as Chancellor Palpatine took his place at the central podium. His face was the epitome of calm authority, his voice soothing as he addressed the gathered representatives.
Honorable members of the Senate,
He began, his tone grave yet compassionate.
I stand before you today to address the matter of Anakin Skywalker, a man who, in a moment of profound grief, acted out of love for the Jedi Order and the Republic.
The room fell silent, all eyes on Palpatine. Some senators nodded in agreement, while others exchanged wary glances.
Anakin Skywalker is not just any Jedi.
Palpatine continued.
He is the Chosen One, a hero who has fought tirelessly to protect our Republic from the horrors of the Clone Wars. His actions, though regrettable, stemmed from the deep pain of losing someone dear to him. In light of these circumstances, I believe it is just to grant him a full pardon.
The chamber erupted in murmurs, some voices expressing approval, others dissent. Palpatine waited for the noise to die down before continuing.
I ask you to remember all that Anakin has done for the Republic,
He urged.
He is a man of honor, of duty, and he has always placed the needs of the Republic above his own. I trust you will all agree that this pardon is not only justified, but necessary for the continued strength of our great Republic.
The vote was swift and decisive. Palpatine's influence was undeniable, and the majority of the Senate agreed with his reasoning. Anakin was pardoned, and the news spread quickly across the galaxy. The reactions were mixed. Many hailed the decision, viewing it as an act of mercy for a hero who had sacrificed so much. HoloNet broadcasts praised Anakin as a tragic figure, a warrior whose grief had driven him to a moment of weakness, but who was ultimately forgiven by a compassionate leader. But not everyone was pleased. Whispers of dissent grew among the populace, with some questioning the Chancellor's motives. They saw the pardon as a dangerous precedent, a misuse of power that placed one man above the law. Even among those who had loved Padme, there was disquiet. Anakin's resolve only deepened after the pardon. He threw himself into the war with renewed ferocity, determined to bring an end to the conflict that had taken everything from him. But as he did, the lines between justice and vengeance began to blur. Palpatine watched with satisfaction as Anakin grew more isolated, more consumed by his own mission. The seeds of darkness were firmly planted, and with each passing day, Anakin drifted further from the Jedi and closer to the shadows. In the streets and the Senate halls, debates raged on about the nature of justice, the power of the Chancellor, and the true cost of the war. But Anakin paid no heed to the voices of dissent. His heart was hardened, his path set. The Republic must be saved no matter the cost. And in the shadows, Palpatine smiled, knowing that the fall of Anakin Skywalker was now all but certain. We fast forward to the events of the Revenge of the Sith. The dimly lit hangar aboard the Invisible Hand buzzed with the hum of lightsabers clashing. Anakin Skywalker fought with a ferocity born of years of war, his blue blade moving in perfect harmony with Obi-Wan's as they dueled Count Dooku. The Sith Lord was cunning and powerful, but the years had taken their toll, and he struggled against the combined might of the two Jedi. With a swift move, Anakin disarmed Dooku, severing both of his hands. The Sith Lord fell to his knees, his eyes widening in shock and fear. Anakin stood over him, breathing heavily, his mind racing.
Do it.
Palpatine urged from his seat, his voice smooth and insidious.
Kill him.
Anakin hesitated, staring down at the defenseless Count. His eyes flicked to Palpatine, who watched with an expectant gaze. But this time something shifted within Anakin. He no longer needed the Chancellor's encouragement or manipulation. The memories of Padme's death, the temple bombing, and the lack of support from the Jedi all weighed heavily on him. Anakin's lips pressed into a thin line. His grip tightened on his lightsaber as he made his decision, not out of a sense of duty or righteousness, but out of anger, frustration, and a desire to end this war by any means necessary. With a single decisive stroke, Anakin severed Dooku's head from his body. The Sith Lord crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Anakin stood there, breathing heavily, his eyes narrowing in the dim light.
I didn't do it for you,
Anakin muttered, turning away from Palpatine. The Chancellor merely smiled, sensing the deepening darkness in Anakin's heart. Back on Coruscant, the tension between Anakin and the Jedi Council grew thicker with each passing day. Anakin sat in the council chamber, his face a mask of calm as the Masters discussed the state of the war. But inside, he seethed.
Anakin, we have decided to give you a seat on the council,
Mace Windu announced, his tone impassive. Anakin's eyes flicked to Windu, searching for any hint of respect or acknowledgement of his abilities, but he found none.
but you will not be granted the rank of master.
Windu added. Anakin's fists clenched. He felt a surge of anger, but he forced it down. The council wasn't elevating him out of recognition or trust. They were using him, exploiting his connection to Palpatine for their own purposes.
We also have a special assignment for you.
Windu continued.
You are to observe the Chancellor. Report back to us with any suspicious activity.
Anakin nodded stiffly, but inside, he was boiling. The Jedi didn't trust him. They saw him as a tool, nothing more. They were punishing him for being close to Palpatine, yet they wanted to use that same connection to their advantage. It was hypocrisy at its finest. Later, when Palpatine finally revealed his true identity, Anakin wasn't surprised. He listened as the Chancellor admitted to being the Sith Lord, but rather than reacting with shock or horror, Anakin remained calm, almost detached.
I thought you should know, Anakin.
Palpatine said, his tone almost fatherly.
The Jedi will never understand you the way I do. They fear your power, but I can teach you to embrace it.
Anakin's expression didn't change. He simply nodded and left Palpatine's office, heading straight for the Jedi Temple. He reported the news to the Council, his voice neutral, almost indifferent. The Council's response was predictable. They would confront Palpatine, try to arrest him. But Anakin felt no satisfaction in this. He was tired of being a pawn in their game. As the Council made their plans, Anakin left the temple and returned to Palpatine's office. He ordered a cup of kaf and sat down across from the Chancellor, who looked at him with a knowing smile.
So, what will you do now, Anakin?
Palpatine asked.
I'm waiting to see what the Jedi will do.
He replied, his voice cold.
They'll come for you soon.
Palpatine chuckled, unperturbed.
And when they do, you'll have a choice to make.
The choice had already been made, and the path ahead was clearer than ever before. The Jedi had pushed him away, and now he would walk a different path, a path that would lead him to power, to control, and ultimately, to the only justice he could believe in. Anakin Skywalker strode into Palpatine's opulent office, his face set in a grim line. The room was dimly lit, casting long shadows across the walls. Palpatine sat at his desk, his dark eyes gleaming with a mixture of anticipation and delight. The door behind Anakin slid open, and the familiar commanding presence of Master Mace Windu, along with Jedi Masters Saci Teen, Eth Koth, and Kit Fisto filled the space.
Anakin,
Windu began, his voice steady and resolute.
We are here to arrest Chancellor Palpatine.
Anakin's heart pounded as he stood before them. Palpatine's gaze shifted to Anakin, his expression a mask of satisfaction.
You see, Anakin,
Palpatine said smoothly,
I warned you that the Jedi were not as noble as they seemed. They intend to overthrow the Senate and seize control for themselves. They wish to betray the will of the people, who are weary of the endless war.
Anakin's jaw tightened. The words cut deep, igniting a storm of emotions within him. He had always respected Padmé's unwavering belief in the Republic's integrity. Now, seeing Windu and the others as part of a supposed conspiracy against the very principles Padmé had stood for pushed him over the edge.
You were right.
Anakin said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage.
They are trying to destroy everything she fought for.
The Jedi Masters stepped forward, lightsabers ignited, their eyes wary and determined. Anakin felt a dark resolve settle over him. The Jedi's betrayal was too great, and his anger consumed him. He would not let them undermine everything he had sacrificed for. Without a word, Anakin activated his lightsaber, the blue blade humming to life. Palpatine's red blade sprang to life beside him, and together they faced the Jedi. The battle was swift and brutal. Saesee Tiin, Eeth Koth, and Kit Fisto fought valiantly, but they were no match for the combined might of Anakin and Palpatine. Their lightsabers moved with deadly precision, dispatching the Jedi Masters one by one. Their defeat was quick and ruthless. Windu, however, proved a formidable opponent. His skills were unmatched, and he fought with a fierce determination. The duel between him and Anakin was intense, lightsabers clashing in a flurry of sparks and energy, but Palpatine, his dark presence and force lightning adding to the chaos, provided the crucial edge. Anakin and Palpatine worked in unison, their combined power overwhelming Windu. With a final, desperate strike, Anakin plunged his lightsaber into Windu's chest, ending the Jedi Master's life. As Windu fell, Anakin stood over him, panting heavily. Palpatine's face, though marked by the intensity of their battle, remained unscathed. The Sith Lord's gaze was one of dark triumph.
You have done well, my apprentice.
Palpatine said, his voice rich with dark satisfaction.
Now, pledge yourself to my teachings. Together, we will unlock the secrets to bringing Padmé back to life.
Anakin's eyes were filled with a fierce determination.
I pledge myself to you,
he vowed.
I will do whatever it takes to save her.
Palpatine smiled, but his expression turned cold as he spoke of the next phase of his plan.
Now that the Jedi have been dealt with, it is time to execute Order 66.
Anakin's heart clenched. He had anticipated the command, but the reality of it was more daunting than he had imagined.
No,
he said firmly, stepping between Palpatine and the communication device.
My problem was with the leadership of the Jedi. I will not kill innocent Jedi.
Palpatine's face darkened, his eyes narrowing with disappointment.
Anakin, they are all the same. They stand against us. The Order must be eradicated.
Anakin's resolve wavered, but Palpatine's insistence was unyielding. The Chancellor activated the Order, sending the signal across the galaxy. The weight of the decision bore down heavily on Anakin. He had chosen his path, and now the full implications of his choices were unfolding. The Republic, the Jedi, and the galaxy itself were on the brink of transformation, driven by Anakin's descent into darkness and Palpatine's relentless ambition. The sun was setting on Coruscant as Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda walked through the ruins of the Jedi Temple. The once vibrant halls were now littered with the remnants of a brutal massacre, the echoes of lightsaber clashes and blaster fire still haunting the walls. Obi-Wan's heart was heavy as he stepped over the fallen bodies of younglings, his mind reeling from the horror of it all. Far from Coruscant, Anakin Skywalker found himself on a remote, barren planet. The landscape was desolate, a fitting reflection of the turmoil within him. He had fled after the massacre at the Jedi Temple, unable to face what he had done. The screams of the younglings echoed in his mind, their cries of terror haunting his every step. Anakin sat down on a jagged rock, staring out at the bleak horizon. His hands trembled as he recalled the slaughter, the blood on his hands. He had thought he was different, that he could control the darkness within him, but now he saw that he was no better than Barriss Offee, the Jedi who had betrayed them all.
You're a monster,
a voice whispered, cutting through the silence. Anakin's heart clenched as he recognized the voice of Barriss Offee. He looked around, but there was no one there, only the wind howling across the desolate landscape.
You killed me, Anakin.
Barriss's voice continued, filled with bitterness.
You thought it would end the darkness, but all you did was replace me. If you hadn't killed me, I would have become a healer, a guide, far from the battles of the galaxy. Now, that path is gone forever.
Anakin squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the voice. but the dark side of the Force swirled around him, amplifying his guilt, feeding on his pain.
You can fix this.
The darkness whispered seductively.
Join us. You have the power to bring her back. Padme, she doesn't have to be gone. You can undo all the pain, all the loss.
Anakin felt the temptation tug at him, the promise of power, the possibility of atonement. But just as he was about to give in, another voice broke through the darkness, a voice that was gentle and filled with love.
Anakin,
Padme's voice called out to him, soft and reassuring.
I believe in you. You have always had the power to do good. Don't let the darkness take you. Use your strength to heal, not to destroy.
Her words cut through the fog of his mind, bringing him back to the light. Anakin's breath hitched as he realized what he was about to do. He couldn't bring Padme back by giving in to the dark side. If he was to atone, it would have to be through the Force, not against it. He sat down, crossing his legs and closing his eyes, allowing the Force to wash over him. He could feel the darkness still lurking, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the light that Padme had believed in. Anakin knew he had to redeem himself, not by seeking power, but by walking the path of a true Jedi, the path that Barriss had strayed from. He would become what she could have been, a healer, a protector, someone who used the Force for good. As the sun set on the distant planet, Anakin opened his eyes, a new determination burning within them. He would redeem himself. For Padme, for the younglings, and for all those he had failed. The path ahead would be difficult, but it was one he was ready to walk, no matter the cost. Years passed, and the galaxy continued to spiral deeper into darkness under the iron fist of the Empire. Anakin Skywalker, once a revered Jedi Knight and the Chosen One, had become a shadow of his former self, a wanderer with no place to call home. His robes were tattered, his face lined with the burden of guilt and the weight of a destiny unfulfilled. He had chosen to walk a path of redemption, abandoning the war and the order, but the scars of his past haunted him with every step. Anakin's journey took him to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, to forgotten worlds and ancient temples, where he sought knowledge of the Force that had been lost to time. He delved into the teachings of the Jedi and the wisdom of ancient civilizations, hoping to uncover the secrets of healing. He had learned to harness the life force of the universe to mend broken bodies, cure diseases, and even heal deformities. The power was unlike anything he had ever known, a force of creation rather than destruction. Yet with each discovery, the temptation of the dark side lurked just beneath the surface. The thought of resurrecting Padme, of bringing her back from the dead, was a constant whisper in his mind. The dark side offered him the power to defy the natural order, to undo the tragedy that had shattered his soul. But Anakin knew that path led only to further ruin. He had seen firsthand what the dark side could do, and he refused to let it claim him again. The memory of Padme's voice, urging him to use his powers for good, kept him grounded. As the Empire's strength grew, so did the resistance against it. Anakin became a ghost on the battlefields, moving silently through the chaos, searching for those in need. He would find Jedi and Republic loyalists on the brink of death, fallen in battle against the Empire's forces, or the Inquisitors sent to hunt them down. With his immense connection to the Force, Anakin could reach out to their fading life forces, healing their wounds and restoring them to life. His ability to save others was miraculous, a testament to the power he had once feared to wield. Anakin knew that he was treading a fine line, that each time he used the Force in this way, he risked drawing the attention of the Emperor. But the desire to atone for his past sins was stronger than his fear. He couldn't save Padme, but he could save others, and in doing so, perhaps he could find some measure of peace. Anakin established secret sanctuaries across the galaxy, hidden away from the eyes of the Empire. These places became refuges for those who had nowhere else to turn. Jedi who had survived the Purge, but were broken in body or spirit, found solace in these sanctuaries. Republic loyalists, hunted by the Empire, were given new hope by the presence of the man who had once been a hero. Anakin became a myth, a legend whispered among the survivors, a healer who appeared from the shadows, mended the broken, and then disappeared into the night. Despite the years that had passed, the dark side's temptation never fully left him. The urge to bring Padme back, to defy death itself, was a constant struggle. But Anakin knew that his journey was far from over. He had chosen to walk a different path, one of redemption and healing, and though the road was long and fraught with peril, he was determined to see it through. In the quiet moments when the galaxy seemed at peace, Anakin would sit in meditation, feeling the Force flow through him, both light and dark intertwined. He had learned that the true power of the Force was not in its ability to destroy, but in its capacity to heal, to bring hope where there was despair. And though the galaxy was still in turmoil, Anakin Skywalker had found his purpose once more. He was no longer a warrior or a Jedi, but a healer, a beacon of light in a galaxy overshadowed by darkness. The silence of the barren world Anakin had made his home was broken by a crackling transmission, a distress signal. The voice was faint, nearly drowned out by static, but unmistakable. Anakin froze as he recognized the familiar tones of his old master, Obi-Wan Kenobi. The message was brief, a desperate call for help, the unmistakable urgency of a man being hunted by the Empire's dark enforcers. Anakin's heart raced. He hadn't seen Obi-Wan since the days before the fall, and now hearing him again stirred emotions long buried. Without hesitation, Anakin tracked the signal to a remote planet on the fringes of the galaxy. As he approached the scene, he could see Obi-Wan fighting off two Inquisitors, his strength waning, his movements labored. With a surge of the Force, Anakin intervened, swiftly dispatching the Inquisitors with a power and precision that left Obi-Wan momentarily stunned. As the last of the Dark Warriors fell, Obi-Wan collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily, his gaze fixed on his mysterious savior. Anakin knelt beside him, gently laying a hand on his shoulder.
"Who are you?"
Obi-Wan gasped, his eyes squinting at the figure before him, the years and battle fatigue clouding his vision. Anakin hesitated for only a moment before speaking softly.
A friend. An old friend.
Obi-Wan's eyes widened as he took in the details. The familiar presence in the Force, the way this stranger moved, the unmistakable scar across his face.
"Anakin?"
He whispered, disbelief etched in every word. Anakin gave a small, weary smile, his eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and relief.
It's me, Master,
he replied. Obi-Wan's eyes filled with tears, and in an instant he embraced Anakin, holding him close as if afraid to let go, as if Anakin might vanish into the void once more.
"You're alive, after all this time."
Obi-Wan muttered, pulling back slightly to examine Anakin's face. He chuckled, noticing the beard that now adorned his former apprentice's face.
"I see you've been copying my style."
Anakin laughed softly, a sound that felt foreign to him after so many years.
You like it? Maybe the Padawan has outshined the Master.
As they sat together, tending to Obi-Wan's injuries, they began to talk, sharing stories of survival, loss, and the crushing weight of the Empire's tyranny. Obi-Wan revealed that the galaxy believed Anakin was dead, slain by the Jedi in a fit of rage, a lie perpetuated by Palpatine to further his control. Many Jedi had been hunted down, driven to the edges of the galaxy, or killed. Fury burned in Anakin's heart at the thought of how Palpatine had twisted the truth, how he had painted the Jedi as monsters.
We can't let this continue, Obi-Wan,
Anakin said, his voice filled with determination.
We need to gather the survivors, unite them, and fight back. We can build a new Jedi Order, one that can stand against the Empire.
Obi-Wan nodded. The fire of rebellion rekindled in his eyes.
"Then we start today, my old friend. The galaxy needs us now more than ever."
Together they began to hatch a plan, the seeds of a new rebellion forming in the ashes of the old. Anakin and Obi-Wan, once master and apprentice, now brothers in arms, would lead the charge against the darkness that had consumed the galaxy. The spark of hope had been reignited, and with it, the promise of a new dawn for the Jedi and the galaxy they once swore to protect.